100 years since the birth of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson, of blessed memory. As he is reverently referred to by his followers and admirers, assumed leadership of the Chabad Lubavitch movement in the wake of the Holocaust as the movement's seventh leader, consecrating his life to the task of resuscitating and revitalizing the spirit of world Jewry as a whole, as well as the spirit of humankind. He's recognized as one of the foremost leaders of our generation. Born in Nikolaev, Russia in 1902 to Rabbi Levi Yitzchak and Chana Schneerson, the man who would become the Rebbe already at the age of 3 displayed unusual capacities of memory and analysis, which he dedicated to Torah study. In 1928, at the age of 27, the Rebbe married Chaya Mushka, the second daughter of Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak Schneerson, the 6th Rebbe of Chabad. They lived in Berlin, then in Paris, where the young Rebbe acquired degrees in mathematics and engineering at the University of Berlin and the Sorbonne. In June 1941, the Rebbe and his wife arrived in the United States, escaping the Nazi onslaught. His father-in-law appointed him as head of 3 key institutions of Chabad: the Educational Network, the Social Agency, and the Publishing House. In 1950, with the passing of Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak, the Rebbe reluctantly ascended to the leadership of Chabad. And Chabad became the expression of his profound love for the Jewish people, a corps of emissaries entrusted with the task of bringing Judaism to every Jew, wherever he or she may be. Inspired by the biblical mandate, and you shall spread forth to the west and to the east, and to the north and to the south. The Rebbe's emissaries, his shluchim, have established centers of Jewish education and social service in every corner of the world. Today, there are almost 3,000 such centers around the world, in cities like Brooklyn, Jerusalem, Columbus, Columbia, Sacramento, Tijuana, Ashkelon, Beitar, Brunei, Lyon, Berlin, Potsdam, Zurich, Prague, St. Petersburg, Moscow, Donetsk, Vilna, Riga, Almaty, Buenos Aires, Rosaria, Bangkok, to name only a few. Since the Rebbe's passing on the 3rd of Tammuz in 1994, his legacy and mission rests in the hands of his Hasidim. The great teacher is alive in his students, the disciples, who themselves became teachers. Here tonight, in commemoration of their teacher, and presenting just a few of his teachings, are a handful of his students, just 5 of the Rebbe's rabbis.
Sie wird wissen, was sie in jeder Sache, mit jeder Sache und in jeder Sache, herausgefunden die Lichtigkeit und was mir darf oben lässt, was mir darf oben die Sache wird durch Lingo der Teile.
The Rebbe was a Rebbe because he had students. His students constantly learned and drank every word that he has given to us. And the Rebbe extracted the lessons from Torah into current day-to-day events. Everything by the Rebbe was, how does Torah look at things? There was no such thing, I think, my feeling, my gut feeling. There is a issue. So what does Torah say about it?
The greatness of the Rebbe that I always admired. And to this day I have not seen a single instance where it has failed. Is that the Rebbe was a visionary.
The Rebbe didn't look at 1, 2, or 3 moves ahead.
Because the Rebbe did not live just in the here and now. The Rebbe lived in the yesterday, in the today, and in the tomorrow.
The Rebbe saw decades ahead of his time.
The Rebbe saw miles ahead. Miles ahead. Things that at that time when he spoke about, we didn't exactly understand what he was.
And it's sometimes to 1 year, sometimes 5 years, sometimes 10 years. Till the Rebbe's words were recognized to be literally prophetic.
The Rebbe, besides being a Rebbe, was a father to us. The Rebbe cared not just on global issues, but he cared about Hasidim. He cared about the children. My uncle came to the Rebbe for the very first time, and he was not involved with the Rebbe so much beforehand. And it was the eve of Yom Kippur. The Rebbe used to give out pieces of cake, honey cake, lekach, customary. So my uncle stood, and the Rebbe gave him a piece of lekach, and they said, for my son-in-laws. And the Rebbe turned around and gave him 3 pieces. And I'll never forget that moment. The Rebbe had in mind hundreds and thousands of individuals. He never forgot that he had 3 son-in-laws.
One of the most compelling things to me about the Rebbe was that I felt, and I believe that this is what drew many people to the Rebbe, that you could fully, completely, totally trust him. There was nothing in his mind, in his response to you, in his relationship with you, where he was doing something because maybe he could benefit somehow. Not even he. Maybe the Lubavitch movement could benefit somehow. Maybe God could benefit somehow from this. When he was addressing you, when you asked him a question, when you needed help, it was, what do you need?
There's no telephone, there's nobody else now, just you.
I don't know anybody else in all the people that I've met, the people that I've read, where one could say, this person was so completely egoless. He had nothing, yet his own personal needs were so completely secondary that he could be completely dedicated to you.
He could have built the biggest shul. He could have had all his Hasidim, encouraged them to live with him. They could have built a city. The Rebbe's shul is one of the most unimpressive Lubavitch structures in the world today. The Lubavitch movement boasts thousands of buildings. I don't exaggerate when I say that. Thousands of buildings all over the world. The majority of them more beautiful and more impressive than the place where the Rebbe studied. He couldn't raise a few dollars.
The Rebbe, in 40 years of leadership, did not take one day's vacation. That's a fact that anybody can attest to. Anyone, my father was there from day one until today, and he knows, we know that he was in the office every single day.
The Rebbe used to come, just let's portray an average day. He's come to the office, let's say 9 o'clock in the morning. He was in the office till about 4 or 5 o'clock, going out to daven. Used to go home when the Rebbetzin was around for half hour, 3/4 of an hour, come back and stay in the office an average night till 11, 12. The end of the day, going home with a package of work. Telephones at home, every emergency was handled by the Rebbetzin. The Rebbe slept a night 2 or 3 hours. A night when the Rebbe used to accept private audience. Private audience used to start 8:30 twice a week. Finished 3:30, 4, 4:30, 5, sometimes 7. Next day the same routine.
In Medrash, habe ich als gesehen, Moshe Rabbeinu gesehen, als der Beis Hamikdash betroffen werden, wird man nicht können maklich sein, die Korbonis, was sie bringen, als Liebe verrieden. Und man gefragt beim Ewigsten, wo soll damals, wie wird damals sein, wo soll man damals tun, oder Ewigster geantwortet. Als Jiden sollen sich zusammenkleiden bei guten Achas, als Sachjiden zusammen. Und sollen sagen, Seder Slicha. Sollen sagen, zum Ebersten Mispallo sein Leben Seder von Slichis. Und unter dem wird der Eberste Mechaper sein. Und dort, bis der Medrash geht zu, noch eine wunderliche Sache, als sich qua Jochel angetan sich in Atalis und Tfilon und hat gesagt, Seder Sliche, die Gimel Midas Arachmim, und bewiesen ein Beispiel von sich allein, was mit darf sagen, Sliche ist, gedei Iden sollen sein sicher in dem ewigsten Bruches, a viel in der Zeit von Golus. Und auch das ist echt eine von der Erklärungen, was mich der Eberster hat gedacht, beweisen Nieden, als Gott a viele mich gefühlt sich in Golus, und ich gefühlt sich in der Tag vor Reish Hashono, wo das der Monze Chayiden, als darf Tshuwe tun, umkehren sich, wie der Obtatsch von Tshuwe ist, umkehren sich zu sich allein, zu sein Emissen Ätzem, zu sein Emissen Sein, wo das ist Idigkeit und Tero, kann der Chas Vesholem trachten, als es etwas angeschlagen geworden sein Verbund mit dem Ebersten, und es etwas anrühren in dem Eberstens Bruch ist, sagt man, Und mit darf das tun, wie bald der Rebischer tatsächlich gesagt, ist sicher, Matzliach sein in Tonschuwe. Und unter dem durch dem Tonschuwe ist nichts wert an neue Überkernisch basiert, nur se Punkt der Heper davon. Das an Pfleg bei jeder Jiden und bei allen Jiden, in wo sie besteht sein emisser Leben und in wo sie besteht sein emisser Koch und in wo es der emis ist im Teier und sie mehr nicht mit seinem Einfluss, was kommt mir bei Hutz von Sachen, was sie seine fremd zu Jiden, kann sich ausweisen auf eine kleine Weile, als öfter nicht das will und nicht das meint und nicht in der Ruf kocht sich. Und wie gesagt, der Pharao der Rebischter gesehen, aber dafür haben wir Verstärkung, wie bald wir gefühlt sich in Golus und sie kommen zu gehen nicht in, oder sie kommen zu gehen nicht Jüdischkeit und sagt, oh, seht ihr sich, wir gefühlt sich in Golus. Pfarrer der Rebischter nicht begnügend, damit, was getan hat, ist gesagt, aber mit so nicht Liches wird vergeben, nur hat allein bewiesen, ein lebendigen Beispiel Klajochel, und bewiesen sich in Natalis und Tfilum, und gesagt dem Seh des Liches, Kedea Jid soll sehen, was der Rebischter ist immer ja nicht.
What the Rebbe is saying is based on many volumes and a lot of discourses, Hasidic discourses, but it's brought down in a concise, very clear language to explain that Shuvah doesn't mean that a person is transforming themselves. It doesn't even mean that they're becoming a new person. It means that they're discovering themselves, uncovering themselves.
When somebody is on the path to self-improvement, when you find that you want to improve, it's not something that you need to go out of your natural desires, something you have to get into some new persona, you have to change and become a different person. Not at all. All you have to do is get back into what you truly naturally are.
Tshuva, when a person wants to return, it's not a transformation away from yourself. It's a transformation to return to your real self. The real self of a Jew is God.
Each and every one of us has a soul, which is a divine component. So you are in effect returning to the divine aspect within you, man created in the image and likeness of God, and having this godly spark within him, and removing the obstacles and the hindrances.
I am not really the shirt or jacket I'm wearing. I'm not really the environment I find myself in. I find myself in an environment. That's not who I am.
Tshuva doesn't mean that this person has to be reformed or transformed. It means take away the distractions.
There's a saying, a parable from one of the students of the Baal Shem Tov, that said that a rooster that went into the mud and got dirty from head to toe, how long will it take you to clean the dirt? It will take you endless hours. What do? You find the soft spot and give it a tickle in the right place, and the rooster gives one shake.
You know, shake off the dust. And you shake off the dust, and all of a sudden, the confusion turns into clarity. And all of a sudden, you find yourself spiritually inspired. You find a closeness with God.
We're talking about bringing Mashiach. How can Mashiach come when we look around us? We see so much problems spiritually, physically. It doesn't take time. It takes one good word to say to the Jew. Touch the Jew in the right spot, and you'll see how pure he is, how clean he is, how dedicated he is.
In the 1940s, when the previous Rebbe moved over to America, he sent one of his elder Hasidim, Rabbi Levitin, to go to Chicago to visit a Jewish businessman who emigrated, or he himself emigrated from Russia years before, and had become a successful businessman, but unfortunately, slowly had drifted away from strict observance and adherence to Torah.
Sometimes, because of circumstances, we have gone astray a little bit. We made mistakes, we were foolish, we misunderstood.
And being that he came from a Lubavitch background, the Rebbe sent Rabbi Levitin to visit this person in Chicago, a special visit. Rabbi Levitin was accompanied by Rabbi Weinberg, and that's how he said the story. He was a first-hand witness. Came to this person was very honored. He knew who this elder chassid was, and he sat down. They offered him something to drink, and they spoke. They exchanged pleasantries. And how's the Rebbe? This man in Chicago asked. And after a little while, in a very pleasant manner, he opens up his desk and he takes out his checkbook, and he asks Rabbi Levitin, "So, who do you write the check to?" Rabbi Levitin said, "I'm not here for any check, and that's not the purpose of the visit at all." And he looks at him and he says, "What do you mean? I mean, the Rebbe needs money. Why else do you think he sent you here?" He said, "Not at all." So he said, "Why else would the Rebbe send you here?" So Rabbi Levitin thought about it and he said, "I'll tell you." He says, "You know the Sefer Torah. From time to time, you have to have a scribe, a sofer, that should check over the Torah, because the letters, sometimes they can become faded, God forbid, cracked, or sometimes completely erased, and they have to be corrected." And similarly, he said, every Jew is a Sefer Torah.
Jews, characteristically, are called ma'aminim bnei ma'aminim. They're believers. Every Jew believes.
And the Rebbe, who he senses what's happening in every Jew's heart, from time to time sends a scribe to check what's happening with the Torah, and if there's something missing, cracked or faded, to correct it.
Sometimes this belief, this faith, is concealed. And as soon as you touch the Jew, the real core of the Jew, you see the true Jew.
This Jew understood the message, got the message, as they said, and he smiled and he said, "I understand what you're saying, and I'll better myself and tell the Rebbe, thank you very much for sending you," and so on. And it ended up in a very pleasant and a warm manner. When they came back, Rabbi Levitin, as Reb Shmuel, as they used to call him, recounted this to the Rebbe, to the previous Rebbe. And the Rebbe, they can see that the Rebbe wasn't pleased. And Reb Shmuel hesitated, finally asked the previous Rebbe, "Rebbe, is there anything wrong?" And the Rebbe said, "There's one difference. On a Torah, the letters are written with ink. The parchment is one entity, and the ink is a separate entity, and they're cleaved together. Therefore, it could happen that something should fade or fall off or be cracked. The letters that are in the heart of a Jew, it's inscribed, it's engraved, it's part and parcel of the Jew, can never be erased. Could be covered up, a little bit of sand, a little bit of dust. All that has to be done is, the letters don't have to be corrected. The dust has to be taken off."
There was a individual that came to the Rebbe once and told the Rebbe so enthusiastically, "I have established just now a minyan." It was in Manhattan, and we had 150 Jews that came to pray Rosh Hashanah, Jews without any background. So the Rebbe says, "They had no background?" She said, no background." So the Rebbe says, "Go and tell them that they have such a beautiful, rich background. They're all children of Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. There are no Jews without a background."
There are people that command other people to do things, but they themselves do not participate. You do this, you do that, but they themselves, they stand back and do something else.
God is not like other rulers who preach but don't practice.
When God tells a Jew to do a mitzvah, he demonstrates through this description in the Talmud.
Whatever God tells us to do, he does himself as well. God, as it were, observes mitzvahs.
If he tells a Jew to put on tefillin, he puts on tefillin, so to speak. Whatever it means in the spiritual realm. If he tells you to put on a talus and to put on tefillin and to say the prayers of penitence, he is participating with us.
This, to me, is the Rebbe's simplistic view, almost overly simplistic view of every detail. A poetic medrash, some flowery story about God putting on tefillin. What does that mean?
God's observance of mitzvahs, obviously, is again a metaphor, an anthropomorphic metaphor. It's not the way God doesn't have a talus, God doesn't have a body to put a talus on. God doesn't have a head to put a tefillin on. God doesn't have a hand to put a tefillin on.
The Rebbe looks at it in such a simplistic, almost ordinary perspective. He says, God is getting involved to show you an example. God cares about your davening.
The way the Medrash puts it is God became of like a shliach tzibur, like a chazan, like the leader of the congregation, who is the representative of the congregation, and on their behalf prays along with them, leading them in it. And the talus and the tefillin, these are the symbols of mitzvahs, these are the symbols of attachment to godliness. So when garbed in these garments of holiness, surrounded by holiness, the tefillin on the hand, opposite the heart, the tefillin on the head, over the brain.
Well, now, what exactly does it mean that God puts on tefillin? So he says, examine what it means that we put on tefillin. When we put on tefillin, we are putting on black boxes which contain within them scriptures which relate our commitment to God. Hear, O Israel, God is one, you shall love God, and so on. That is what tefillin are. It is our commitment to God. When God puts on tefillin, what do you think it says in his tefillin? His commitment to us, to the Jew. So when he puts on tefillin, he is committing himself to us. Now that's what it means. That's what the Rebbe is bringing out here. When we are given an image of God putting on talus and tefillin and saying prayers of penitence, he has commanded us to return to him. He tells us, I return to you. That's my penitence. My penitence is to return to the Jewish people. We know that we have certain difficulties with the way God treats us at certain times. So God says, I will do tshuva. I will return closer to you. I will do more of what you need me to, you want me to do for you. God always does what he needs, what we need him to do, but what we want him to do, I will do what you want me to do. I will do tshuva as well. So it is an intimate relationship between the Jews and God here. It isn't a one-way street. He tells us what to do and he's somewhere else. He tells us what to do because he's doing the same.
The entire Torah, the fact that he gave us the Torah, is a humbling of himself.
We are completely, drastically, incomparably different than God. Therefore, there is no way that we can relate to God. There's no point of contact. It's two total opposites. How then can we relate to God? I need something which has a common denominator to both God and ourselves. And that is the Torah. And these are the mitzvahs. Torah and mitzvahs are identified as God. God and Torah are one and the same. They're literally one and the same. Because Torah, that is God's will, that is God's wisdom.
The essence of God is condensed within the Torah. That's the whole concept of tzimtzum, where there's a condensation, where his greatness has to be limited to the words and to the concepts of the Torah. And the same concepts, the same ideas with tshuva, where God is showing the way. Yes, his greatness is also showing the fact that he's prepared to come down and to give us that ability.
Als hij broek gedaan had, hij was
Ik bedoel, in mijn kerk werd gezegd, je zult in zijn naar Chassid. Natuurlijk dat met de Chassid is, dat je naar
wir
Chassid.
sind Chassidim.
Ja, dan werd je zijn naar Chassid, en dan waren die kinderen zo zijn Chassid.
Moment.
We zijn naar goed neven, naar de goed neven, naar de eerste dank van de Matane van de brief. En ze zijn toegelicht werden to andere drie, waar ergens van de rabbijn. Dat is wel geraden. Maar de eerste dank.
When this man comes to the Rebbe and he says, Rebbe, I believe in your power. The Rebbe, I'm sure, gave him a blessing. And I've no doubt the Rebbe's blessing was fulfilled. I've seen that thousands of times, literally. It's in my own family and with others. But the Rebbe was not interested in being the miracle worker. What they used to call, when they first started writing in the Western world about Hasidism and Hasidic rabbis, the Wunder Rebbe, the one who creates miracles, because that's the reputation they had in the folksy terminology. The Rebbe, in everything that he did, was trying to produce some kind of an effect. And what he's saying to this man is, if you believe in my power, as you come to me because you really believe that I have something, then logically, to be consistent, you should accept from me what I say to you. So I say to you, don't talk to me about your father being a Chassid. Don't talk to me about your grandfather being a Chassid. Listen to me, you become a Chassid. You become a pious, God-fearing, God-loving individual.
The Rebbe, in the very first public address that he gave, when he officially accepted the mantle of leadership of the Chabad movement, this was in the 10th of Shvat in January of 1951. His first talk was, we need to remain committed to what the Rebbe, his father-in-law, all his projects and all his dreams and ideals, and we need to carry the ball forward, even after the previous Rebbe passed away. And I'm accepting to lead the campaign. But you have to do the work. This is not that I am going to do the work. I am not going to bring some magical powers to this campaign. You, the Hasidim, you, the community, are going to have to do all the work. I will be there to help.
The tzaddik has tremendous powers, but he will never use them, except when necessary. He will certainly not abuse them. The Talmud has the following expression, based on a verse in Samuel, in the Bible. Tzaddik Moshel Beyiras Elokim. The tzaddik, the righteous, the saint, he rules over the awe of God, which the Talmud interprets the following way. I rule over the world. Who rules over me? The Talmud says the tzaddik. HaKadosh Baruch Hu Geyser, God makes a decree, the tzaddik mevatel, the tzaddik can annul the decree. Tzaddik Geyser, the tzaddik makes a decree, HaKadosh Baruch Hu Mekayim, and God observes it. God keeps it.
There's a statement that's made about Moses. We read it every day in our prayers, in the morning prayers. It says, Vayaminu. They, the Jewish people, believed in God and in Moses. So we use the same terminology of belief, of faith, with respect to God and with respect to Moses, who's immortal. How does that work? I mean, do we worship Moses or worshiping God?
Tzaddikim could indeed annul things, and I've personally experienced such what you would call supernatural feats of tzaddikim, that they can just look at you and literally know everything about you, which is no way in the world you could possibly know. That they can read your thoughts, that they can see things happening right now overseas, elsewhere. I've actually experienced these things. Or that you may have, God forbid, a fatal disease that the doctors have given a pope and it's beyond, and the x-rays show all the growths, etc., etc., and that the tzaddik will give a blessing. I've seen that with the Rebbe many times. The tzaddik will give a blessing, and he says, don't worry, everything is fine. Have another x-ray, they take another x-ray, it's gone. It's completely disappeared. And this is not by what we would call faith healing. Faith healing is where the person comes to the one he believes in, and he asks for blessings, whatever it may be, and by placing his faith in that person, you kind of psychosomatically create those effects, which is recognized by medicine, the concept of psychosomatics. Here we are talking where the person affected and the tzaddik, they don't even see each other. They don't even know about each other. The tzaddik may know about him, but he doesn't know about the tzaddik. So it's not what we normally understand as faith healing. Faith healing, if I believe in that chair, or I believe in a monkey, like certain individuals that you see in amongst the faith healers, puts his hand on your head, you're healed, you're healed, you're healed, and you actually believe it. If you take a tape and a monkey puts his hands on your dog, on your head, and the tape plays, you're healed, and you believe that the monkey is saying that, and you believe the monkey is doing that, it may heal you. But that's not what comes from the monkey or from the one outside. It comes from within yourself. Here we are talking about a situation where there is no contact whatsoever between the two. You may be totally unaware. So it is there. But a tzaddik will not even use that either.
That tzaddik is a person who becomes egoless, a person who becomes transparent. So God shines through the prophet, and God shines through the righteous individual. And when you look at the righteous person, rather than getting confused or clouded with the ego or with the reality of who that person is, that person becomes a perfect reflection of godliness.
Offhand, this would mean that tzaddik is in charge. In some ways he is. But the moment somebody were to try or even think of abusing it, he would cease being a tzaddik. It's a kind of a catch-22.
To me, the Rebbe's greatness was not that he was a supernatural person. To me, the Rebbe's greatness is humility, that it's not what I feel. What does God want? His devotion, his dedication to God brought about that he was dedicated to each and every Jew. That he cared, that he truly cared, that he sacrificed his life, that he didn't have his own personal life was nothing. The main thing is someone else.
A rabbi. People come to me and they give me compliments sometimes. It feels good. It's nice to be complimented. For sure, there'll be a moment of hesitation before I come back. Somebody tells me, I believe in you. I say, well, you're very kind. Thank you. I appreciate that. You look at that video, the Rebbe doesn't have, there's no sort of skip or jump in time. The Rebbe there's no time which the Rebbe takes in the compliment and says, thank you, or says, oh, really, I don't really have any power. It's not an issue. Of course, he's a Rebbe, he's a tzaddik, and his power. So to the Rebbe, there's no personal thing. Say, wow, Rebbe, you're so great. He says, oh, yeah, I appreciate that, or thank you. No, really, I'm not so great. Don't focus on me. Somebody who tries to point out they're really not so great, that's because they have an ego problem. I mean, because they really think they are pretty cool. They say, well, I'm not that great, I'm great, but not that great. The Rebbe doesn't have that whole issue. It's not an issue. We talk about a tzaddik like that. Somebody comes along and he says, Rebbe, we believe in your power. He says, okay, why aren't you a chassid?
Believe in your own power. If you believe in my power, then you'll be a chassid. That's the whole idea. It's not believing in the Rebbe's power.
A chassid means he goes beyond what is the bare minimum and does it with the most advanced way. If you can buy a mezuzah, you can either buy the cheapest one because that's the bare minimum, or you can look for the best one.
When a chassid, when a yid connects himself to the Rebbe, that means that he immediately, first of all, gets an inspiration, but more than that, he gets right away a responsibility.
Somebody once came, a survivor of the Holocaust, and he lost his family, he lost his faith in Auschwitz. And he had an incurable skin disease. And this was in the first or second year of the Rebbe became Rebbe. And he heard about Lubavitch Rebbe. Somebody advised him, why don't you go to him, ask for a blessing? So he comes to the Rebbe, says, Rebbe, I'm from the old country, I'm a Chassid. As a matter of fact, he said the Belzer Chassid. But I'm a graduate of Auschwitz. I don't believe in God anymore. I don't believe in these things anymore. So the Rebbe asked him, he says, my dear friend, if you don't believe in God, why do you come to me? I have no powers. I can only do that which God allows me to do. I'm at best an instrument in God's hands. So if you come to me, you believe that I can do something, this means you must believe in God.
Ist verbunden mit Lesaken Lehmann Bemalchus Dalet Jud auf Herabringen die Hakore in der Anerkennung von jedem,
was gefindt sich in der Welt, a de Welt nicht kein Dschungel, was kol die all im Gewar, a wie bald als hat starke Beguf, oder starke Bemomme, oder starke in Jedis, oder starke mit Militär, der Fahrt Konnerton kol Masche Liebe Chofetz. Der Fahrt, was hat in sich, dem Keach ab durchfinden, wie bei ihm kommt es, darf sich nicht rechnen mit allerlei Machschoves und Cheshbeines. A viele, wie bald das Hepechere Zähne. Was jede, was ist auf der Ruf der Entfer, als hat die Macht, und das ist sein Willen. Ich wo soll nicht tun, wie bei ihm kommt es bei der Zähne. Ist der Entfer auf der Ruf ist, als was für eine Macht soll nicht haben, ist da ab Jesch Balabais Lebiro so, als da der Emisser Balabos von der ganzen Welt, Breishis Bora Lekimes Ashomayim Vesoret, was der Balabos von der ganzen Welt, ist eine sichere Sache, Sof kol Sof, wird es von der Emisser Balabos, nicht oder was hat mehr Macht oder mehr Geld für Chulu, da gab es die Menschen, was befinden sich herum. Weil das ist die einzige Sache und der einzige Weg, was sie bekommen, Menschen nach Reis helfen, oder nach Reis helfen nach Chevra, eine Gruppe von Menschen, oder nach Reis helfen nach Agora Kol Godel. Also sie sollen sich nicht noch untergehen, zu der Mrotzin, wo sie bei sie da, sie sollen echt finden, wie bei sie kommt es. Nicht rechnen sich der Miet, wo sie tut sich herumsehen, wo sie der Rotz von den Menschen herumsehen, ist der einzige Weg, aber bei Emes das zu beseitigen, der Hanhoge ist, durch den Ruf, was man pflanzt ein, als sie da Balabais Lebiro so, und das, was rät sich heim, als ich beim Historien, als wird sich behalten, und wird nicht wissen, wie fühlt sich. Allahs kam mit nicht wissen in den Himmeln, wo dort befindet sich der Balabais, sagt man immer, dass ich viele in Emes, dass er nicht nur viele in das Israel oder in einem anderen Glas, dass ich viele in Amitis Amitzis. Der Amitis Amitzis ist nicht verbunden mit kein das. Amitis Amitzis ist es, Amitis Imotze, nimmst du Kol HaNimtzoyim, der Emes Hawaii Leilo, der Eberste ist ein Balabos, wo Sere Mamzi Kol HaNimtzoyim, der Emes Hawaii Leilo, der Eberste ist ein Balabos, wo Sere Mamzi Kol HaNimtzoyim, alle Sachen, was befinden sich in der Welt. Und der, was sagt, dass nicht, dass nicht nur, dass nicht kein Tier, nicht kein Frumme, oder nicht kein religiöser Mensch, narrt sich allein ab, wo sieht nicht, wo die Welt ist, bei Mitis, la Mitosi und Betokwe. Wie Kohomer dazu kommt zu gehen nach der Eitzerhor und sagt, wird das tun, behalten der Heer beim Historien. Sagt der Rebische, aber ich beim Historien, war nicht, lehe Renu, als da an ein Reihe wesen Schema.
The existence of God, the fact that God exists and is the master of the universe, first of all, this transcends religion. It goes beyond religion.
Rebbe used to say, it says it on the American dollar. Everybody is chasing the almighty American dollar, and it says, in God we trust. And the Rebbe underscored that states very clearly that the founding fathers had no problem with God.
Religion means, how am I going to address this God? What is the way to serve this God? So each religion has their approach and so on, and how do we see God, and what exactly does He want from us, and what are we supposed to do? That's already, how do you address the God?
Religion is a set of beliefs in God. It's a set of practices, rituals, concepts, theories. It particularizes God in a sense. But the
fact that God exists, this is an objective truth, has nothing to do with how you see your life or creation.
You did not create the world around you.
The fact that you are here is a sign that God exists and that you've been put here by God.
There is a world, and there is a master of the world. Whether you serve this master, recognize this master this way or that way, that's not what we are discussing. All what we are discussing is what it says in Pirkei Avot, in the Fathers. There's an eye that sees, there's an ear that hears, everything is recorded, everything is there, and the day of judgment, the day of reckoning will come. And the day of reckoning will not necessarily you have to wait till you drop dead and sit before a throne of judgment. The day of reckoning may be here and now in this world may yet come. And what goes around comes around. So face up to reality.
The Rebbe considered this to be something which every single inhabitant of the world needs to know. He said that the only answer to any difficulty in the world is that ultimately you have to answer to God. Ultimately God is there watching.
Deep down you know what's what. Deep down you know the truth. Stop fooling yourself. Let alone when deep down you know. There's an eye that watches. Today we have video cameras all over the place. In banks, for security, airports, etc., etc. Guess what? These video cameras have been shining on us since day one.
And if we could convey this idea to our youth, and the Rebbe had ideas on how to convey it. He gave suggestions. He said that even in the United States, where there is a separation of church and state, to have a moment of silence where you do not tell anybody what to think about, but it's a moment of reflection. You need to reflect and think about what's important to you. Ultimately, people would think of it, the children would think of important things, and this was a way to introduce morality.
It's fascinating to listen to these words that the Rebbe talked about in the 80s, the late 70s and the 80s, talking about the world as a jungle, and talking about the great need that the American public school system had to start to talk about God. Let's fast forward that 12, 13 years. How many school shootings have we seen in the United States, in the public school system? And like you go and take a look at things that Rebbe was saying 15 years before, and it's unnerving, because he's describing those exact conditions.
Day of judgment will come. And the ultimate judgment, perhaps the worst judgment, the most severe judgment, is when you have to face your own conscience. Somebody else you can fool. Somebody else you can talk your way around it. But as regards yourself, deep down you know the truth. And for that there's no answer.
Geist zum Rambam mit Punkt Asele bis vorne, gefindt mir sich a Protim und Protim, was mir gefindt das nicht bei Rubem Kikulam, vom Peske Haloche ist, in Rambam seinen dort der alle Haloche von Sheva Mitzvah Neneach. Und das in Sifrei HaYudalet, wo der Mitzvah der Chesem, dem Kol Sefer Shalom. Nur leider, mit sie beschönes und Mischunis, hat man die bis Israel kolponen, die gewähnt hat, die hat Gosche. Aber es soll magisch sein, aber der Rambam hat sich vernommen, sei mit ihnen, sei mit nicht ihnen, und hat sich vernommen, nechet bei einer Gehe, zu Bries Aguf Shalahem, und Bries Hanefesh Shalahem, und wie man hat sich dem Seder jene von dem Rambam, wie allein beschreibt es. Und beschreibt es nicht als das Seder von der Tag, was sie gewähnt an Nesna, nur als sie gewähnt Seder jene Horogim. Beschreibt dort, was sie sich vernommen, mit Refuis und mit Inyonim, wo sie seien verbunden mit Tiden, und was sie sich vernommen mit Refuis und Inyonim, wie das verbunden mit Nitiden. Und schreibt da beide Sachen, die Reingetonkeit in der und die Ernstkeit mit Biss und Messias Nefesh, nicht gucken auf den eigenen Gesund,
Und auf eigene Unionen, wie bald das mit darf und mit Konton a Teva, zweiten Menschen, a viele, wenn das reizt sich nicht wegen a Jeden. Und wie das erreicht, a Dugma Chaya, wie schreibt in dem Sefer ha-Judalisch, in Hilches Mlochim, als da a Chiyu, was nicht a Fieden, als sie sollen sein, kol boe Elon, sollen die Keim sein, Seele Mitzvahs, mit der Sofe Bose, aber man kann sie durch das zu bringen, als sie sollen haben, a Chelek, Loelem Abo. Und wie der Rambam besechet, Madge, schechet in Siyim Sifre, aber Schaße wird, wenn Jese Hazman, ist das Mesa Moschiach, und sagt, was Moschiach wird tufton, ist gleich Mamschich. Moschiach wird tufton, ich habe es nicht Israel. Und fahrt darauf, Jivne bis am Nigdash bin Keime. Und fahrt darauf, Jakob kol Israel, Lachazik bitcha, Lachazik bidocher. Sagt aber noch darauf, verdämmelt wird Mekui werden der Jud, als der Moschiach wird das durchführen, als wird sich abgeben mit Kol und Israel und bringen sie, als sie sollen werden, der Hawaii, bis in der Nähe von der Jobdi Schem Echod, der sagt noch Shenemar, als das wird sein Sofa Bruder, der Jobdi Kulam Schem Echod.
Very non-sectarian in his attitude in general. The Rebbe had a much bigger perspective. The Rebbe's perspective was much bigger than Lubavitch. He didn't see himself as Lubavitch Rebbe. He was Lubavitch Rebbe, but the Rebbe saw himself as a person that was poised to affect the world, to reach out to every person, to every Jew in particular, and then as time went on to reach out to every single human being.
There's no such thing. If somebody's not Jewish, I don't care. What do you mean you don't care? God created. And it has a purpose, and it has a mission. And we have to encourage our responsibility.
And that's ultimately the mission of the Jewish people. It's, you see, the Gullus mentality, the diaspora mentality, was one of survival. We had to survive. We were being persecuted. We had to survive. And it changed the Jewish mindset. I don't know that there was a choice. I don't know that the Jews could have survived otherwise. But that's not really what we're about. We're not about being a cloistered people. We're not about living in a ghetto and somehow just protecting our own. But rather, there's a big picture here.
Ultimately, the Torah is not only for the Jewish people. The Torah has laws which pertain to all of mankind. And ultimately, the purpose of Torah is to bring the Word of God and the recognition of God to the entire universe.
The Rebbe initiated a campaign, just as he initiated campaigns to bring Jews to greater religious consciousness, also to bring the Gentile world to greater moral consciousness and to abide by the Noahide code as an obligation. And it are practical aspects. You can say it's preparatory to readying the world for the Messianic age, when all mankind will serve God. They're not all converted to become Jews.
We have no interest at all in teaching Judaism to the nations of the world, or trying to bring them into the practice of Judaism, but there are many laws in the Torah which are stated specifically to all people of earth.
Secondly, it will change, hopefully, the moral fiber of the world as it is at present. When you have so much immorality and so much indecency and so much inhumanity and so much suffering because each one doing his own thing and just being concerned about himself, not caring about anybody else, to make them aware of these laws about law and order, justice throughout, no murder, no stealing, no incest, no idolatry, etc., etc.
Those are the 7 Noahide laws, which include all laws of jurisprudence and common decency among people.
In our day and age, we see every conceivable indecency or immorality is hailed as, hey, to each his own. You do what you feel like doing, let me do. You do your thing, let me do my thing. And you have no right to tell me what is right and what is wrong.
We're coming closer to the times of Mashiach. Times of Mashiach mean that there'll be goodness and kindness. We'll all go back to Israel, and the world will be a better place. It means that it will be a time when the world will be permeated with godliness. It'll be a time when the world will be permeated with truth, with the ultimate truth, when everything will be seen for what it really is. And part of the preparation for that is to start getting the world ready for Mashiach.
Mashiach is not about a Jewish king, a Jewish savior. It's going to be great for us guys. Mashiach is about perfecting the world. Mashiach is about tearing down the concealment that God built into the world for the purpose of its being torn away. And the Rebbe toiled and labored his entire life, not only to change his community, not to help his friends, or to reach out to his confidants or members or congregants. The Rebbe toiled his whole life to change the world and to make the world a better place.
Nowhere, pretty much nowhere, except for the Rambam, Maimonides, 800 years ago, 900 years ago, talks about this, and he incorporates it into the body of Jewish law. In nowhere else is this found. Now the Rebbe has again brought it up to the forefront. He said, "This now is our campaign. We need to do this."
You know, there was a proclamation that the United States Congress issued one of the years in honor of the Rebbe's birthday. And it was connected to the 7 Noahide laws, and there was a mention of Christian, Judeo philosophies or ideas, something like that. And the Rebbe penned in, when they sent it into the Rebbe for his approval, the Rebbe wrote the word Islam with a question mark. And when the Rebbe's emissaries back in Washington tried to push it, they said, "You're probably 10 or 15 years ahead of your time." You listen to President Bush speak in the last few months. He's talking about 3 great religions. And it's fascinating. The Rebbe saw that 15 years ago and wanted to know, why weren't you including Islam?
And this affects directly also the Jewish activities and all the people around us. If we behave according to this 7 Mishnah, it became much easier to achieve all the good things that we all have spoken about. And to achieve it and then in a sweet manner.
Und wir soll wissen sein, dass wir gefühlen sich in einer teure Welt. Nur der Jeser Hore sich mit Stadl becholi Fanny, aufzudecken die Teierkeit, was gefühlt sich in Welt, gedei, wir soll sich mit Jahre sein, Chas Visholle. Oder Alkoholpon im Ton mehr nicht von Jeser wegen, becholi, und unter demol der Monten sich Adosis Nosse, auf Drufe selber schaffen geworden, auf zudecken, auf Nemes, sie sich kein Wunder nicht, was gefindt. Kammer leipi tuyin v'hasosis v'chuli, und me geht lebeter darke derech malke shaleilom ze HaKadosh Baruch Hu.
The Rebbe called us, he said that we are the work, Pa'ola de Yamamana, we are day workers, workers with light. It is not our job, the Rebbe said, to banish darkness. That's not our job. We need to bring out light. And he would often use, you cannot beat back darkness with a stick. The only way that you can dispel darkness is by introducing light. So why wrestle with a problem when you just introduce something good and the problem will dissipate on its own? So when he saw people, when he related to people, some people will always automatically see that person's problem and, well, how am I going to fix that person's problem? The Rebbe always looked for where is that person's strength? How can I bring out that person's strength? And when you bring somebody's strength out, when they begin to see their own abilities and their own strengths and they act on their own strengths, then their weaknesses fall by the wayside. Then they get busy with their strengths, so the weakness goes away on its own.
when we come to a child which is not conducting himself so great, we say, you know, you're such a good kid. It awakens within him his goodness. He wants to become good. And the Rebbe was so careful always to talk positive about each and every Jew, to talk about his soul. You have such a beautiful neshama.
There are other religions in which there is somehow a struggle between Satan and God, as if they were two equals and they're struggling with each other. In Judaism, there is no struggle at all. God created the Yetzer Hara with a purpose, with a reason. He said, your job is to run interference. I need the Jews to, and people in general, to commit themselves. We need a challenge. We need a challenge to bring out the best. And therefore, it's like when your teacher gives you a test, the test isn't somehow working against you. The test is working with you. That is the way they bring out the best of your, the best knowledge. This way you'll remember the material better. God also set up a test, many tests, throughout our life. And so the test works with you. It brings out the best. If you understand that the Yetzer Hara is not somehow working against God, but is working with Him, it's just that He needs to bring out the best in you, then you begin to understand that everything in the world, even the challenges, even those things which seem to be pushing you away from God, aren't pushing you away from God. They are really there to draw you closer to God in a more powerful way.
Evil by its nature is not definitive. Evil is never clear. The whole nature of evil is to cast a smokescreen, to try to confuse the facts, to make you unaware and not recognize evil for what it is.
The Rebbe pointed out many times what is written in the Torah, that everything that God does ultimately is for the good. Even when He presents a challenge, and even when there are very difficult challenges, and even those challenges which are simply impossible to understand, why God would do this. And there are many of those, unfortunately. And we pray that we shouldn't have those challenges, and that we should have only obvious good happen to us, where they don't have to be in the form of challenges. But when the challenges do happen, we know that this is God presenting us with opportunities. Sometimes very, very difficult to understand, but if you have this general view that everything that God does is ultimately for our benefit, then it makes it a little simpler to face challenges, even when it's just almost unbearable.
It's not the world that's against God, it's the forces that God unleashed in His world to challenge you. See past them. Move past it. Again, it's an underlying current of the Rebbe's universal view of things. Very different from the traditional Galut exile mentality. They aspirate, let's just survive. The Rebbe didn't want to survive, he wanted to blossom.
Wo der Rebester sagt, dass Pardis, wo das Pardische lebt. Bis wann nicht, dass nicht Pardis war, kommt bederach Arai, no das wird Gnuni, was Iker Schiene gewinnt, darf gehen unter der Welt.
Erklärt in Teil und erklärt Baruch und Pashtus ist eine Posheterie. A wie viel Jid kann sein Poshet. Und noch mehr ist Noshim, a viele Tag. Also fühlen sich auf, wie es steht in Shulchan Aruch, durch machen sie Adire Leisborach, bechol Elam Azeh Atachten. Als letzter a viele werden a Menschen, was nicht genasken Ziburi. Und bechlall ein Mensch, was lebt sich, passt sich, lese Zibische Tier. Passt in Tov der Ramba, a die Meise, was a viele Barkotten sicher dort erinnern am Meise. Jetzt konnte Machria sein, Kol, Elam, Kule, Fulekavs Hus, und Mevi, Yeshua, war Zolo, war der ganze Welt, wo das der Bior bepasst, was sie kommen, sagen, als ein kleines Kind, kann bringen, schien Adire Leisborach betachtenim, das Adine Ramba und nicht a jüdische Gesehre, der verstandig in a Sechel Aposhut, was sie beschaße do, a Mischkeles, a Miznayim, a Vog, wo sie Schoko, machst du a See und machst du a See. Versteht la viel a klein Kind, als ein und einzige Nekude, am mit Meshe sein, litzad Echot, wird das Machria sein, die ganze Welt. Und das geht echt auf Verstand, was jeder Ried kann sein als Schliach, worum die Medubel, jeder Ried, a viel a kotische Biktani, hat dem Keach auf zu tun am Meise, was hat wirken, bechol oilem kulei, als kommt zu vorne ein Mann oder a Frau oder a Mädel oder a Ingel, und was ist a Schliach, bemokim Misuyom, und mir sagt, dass du, was wird sagen, ein Wort, bemokim Misuyom, wird überkehren in der Welt und Machria sein, Mevi, Kol, Oilem Kulei, Leishua ve'atzol.
This is often a problem that people can't see themselves when you live, one human being in this vast world that we live in. There are billions of people, and how could my one little act today, that doesn't mean my whole life, never mind that whether your whole life, your 70, 80, or 100 years that you live will make a difference, can today, or can even this one moment make a difference that will affect the entire world? And the Torah does tell us, and the Rebbe points this out, that if you make the right or wrong move right now, it affects the entire world. So he gives the analogy of a scale. There is no reason that we should not believe that the world is perfectly balanced at any time. Right now that it's perfectly balanced, it can go either way.
One grain of sand can tip the scale, or the proverbial the straw that breaks the camel's back. When everything is equibalanced, all you need is one tiny straw, practically weightless, certainly practically worthless. And yet you put it on one side of the scale, bingo, that's it.
If we should consider a child small and a rabbi big, and I guess a speech from the pulpit big, and putting a penny into charity as small, then,
first of all, there's too much. You're biting off much more than you can chew. Secondly, results are not always empirically evident, certainly not immediately. And as I don't see the immediate results, then I get discouraged. Forget it, it's not worth it.
Nothing is too small, and nothing is insignificant. Everything's important. Even the actions of a small child. Everything has weight. Everything has a force with it. And the Rebbe contended everything seriously. He took everything with great seriousness. Nothing was insignificant. Not the smallest child, and of course not a great world leader. How many politicians, how many great scholars have that sort of affinity for the action of a child? In real and honest truth.
We have a tendency of big projects, big action. Change the world. Change the world? What can I do? There was a famous Hasidic Rebbe, Reb Chaim of Tzanz, who once said, when I was young, I decided I'm not leaving this world until I've changed it all. This world is corrupt, this world is bad, but I'm going to do something like that. As I grew older, I realized, ain't gonna happen. So I'm not gonna leave this world till I change my country, at least. That's more realistic. As I grew still older, so it's not going to work. I'll not leave till I change my city, my community. Now that I've become an old man, I'm wondering, I hope I can change myself.
The Rebbe always said, don't look at the Jew at whatever level he is. See what his direction is. He has done today one mitzvah beautiful. Tomorrow you'll do another one. And if you fail, get up and continue walking up.
Don't be overambitious. Who says you have to change the whole world? If it could be done, it would have been done already a long time ago. There have been many greater, more talented people, more gifted people than you. Obviously did not succeed. And because these people are so gifted and they're so ambitious and idealistic and really meant well, and they saw it doesn't work, you throw in the towel. So the emphasis is very simple. Start with one step. A child does not learn how to run. A child learns how to take one step at a time. Once a child takes one step, wow, look what he did, look what little Yankele did, look what little Sola did. It was actually standing, actually took a step, the first step. That goes into the album, the first step. That one step is as important as walking around the block or going from one end of the city to the next end of the city.
If the whole world was created for me, can you imagine my responsibility? What does that give me? Tremendous responsibility. It's not pride. It's not ego. It's direction. Every moment of your life, you should know that you can make the whole world tilt. Because the whole world was created for you.
Methods of Wittgenstein in general, and especially some see that influence a crowd, then you have on the same effort, you can influence a great number of people. Same thing as a temple. A temple is the expression never made. If you like in one temple, which is providing the needs in life for all the people in the world. And the same thing goes for your activities in the members in around. And God Almighty bless you to use all your energy in the right direction to be successful.
Aber eben gesagt 26 Jahre, ab der zweiten Mal, da finden wir schon, die werden beide busy.
Ja, jetzt gehen folgende Woche, der ist satisfied von der neuen Regierung.
Die müssen auch politische Ehe. Die beste Politik war die Hauptsache, die haben Leben, das lassen wir mit Simcha. Das ist die Satisfied, die ich geschrieben kam davon. Hat schon am meisten 30 Jahre, als bin in Zehre, hat die Kurs Neffe, Dechig, 1 Million, und haben dazu gedacht, warum haben wir schon Chazoko, und haben wir schon Zorn, und wenn sie haben gesagt, Menschen, kämen mit der Reis, Kinder schon, und das heißt, es war nur mit zu reden. Und da haben wir schon Zara, und wir haben schon Chazoko.
The narrow government means if you have an opinion, if there is a party in the government or the ruling party has a certain approach to something, if they bring in a wide government, which means that let's say if we're talking about a right-wing government, the Likud government, if they make it into an open government where they also bring in the Marach, the Labour Party, then they can't do anything. They become, should I use the word emasculated, because whatever they want to do, they need to now consult a partner. We already know that they have a different opinion than the partner, and we don't want to do what the Labour Party wants to do. So if you want to do what you need to do, you have to rely on your own opinions. And as we see today, unfortunately, the Rebbe's wisdom, which he spoke about and cried about and shouted about and alarmed about, and for 30 years, from the end of the Six-Day War, he warned about what is happening today.
The Rebbe stated, without wavering even once, in 30, 40 years, his opinion, which is well known, that it's forbidden, according to the Code of Jewish Law, to give up any land. And the Rebbe said that if it would really be land for peace, be no problem.
The only issue with regards to our relations with the Arabs, whether returning land or territory and so on, there's only one issue involved. That is the security of the Jewish people in Israel. It has nothing to do with biblical restrictions on turning over land to foreign nations. It has nothing to do with retaining holy sites. That is not the issue that the Rebbe discusses. That is not what the negotiation should be based on. There's one issue only, and that is we need to defend the population of Israel. We know that we have an enemy around us who has only one intention, and that is to annihilate the Jewish people, and we need to keep a strong, secure border.
According to Shulchan Aruch, giving up land is endangering the people.
If the neighbors were to invade a border area, even if they're just looking for minor, inconsequential things, they came across to gather some straw, the Shulchan Aruch says, you take an army out on Shabbat. You can violate Shabbat to rout the enemy from that position, because once you open a border, then they can conquer the rest of the land. So the Rebbe said, this is not a question that should be asked of politicians. This is not a question to be asked of anyone. Only the military experts are to be consulted about whether you can turn over or give a certain piece of territory to the Arabs. Is this needed for our defense, or is it not needed for our defense? And the Rebbe maintained for 30 years that the military insists that we need all this area to maintain a defensible border. And so nothing else counts. And that all these discussions where people would lead the discussion into areas of, well, what's wrong if we give a holy site, and why should we lose lives to maintain a holy site? The Rebbe said that's a red herring. This is not about holy sites. This is about maintaining a secure border.
כבוד הרב, צריך לאמץ את ידי היהודים שיעמדו בתקיפות.
והגיעו מצוות התורה. וכל תמיד משחק בולטת באורץ, כנדרת כחד.
כן, אז אני מקווה באמת שאנחנו נזכה לשבת בביטחון ובשלום. ואני...
נסעתי שלום, החלקים כתוב נסעתי שלום באורץ. נסעתי שלום באורץ.
כן, ואני מקווה שכבוד הרב יאמץ את ידי היהודים וידי הממשלה לעמוד בתקיפות ובאומץ לב נגד כל מי שמנסה להחליש את ישראל ולהחליש את היהודים. היהודים צריכים חיזוק היום.
ואני יודע מה וכתוסף בגלוי שעושה מה נקרא יהודים, כי הם תיקון בכל עבודת עלה. עבודת עלה זה התיר שהכוסף, גם שיר ושלוזות, העם ישראל, יהודים, אתה הם תיקון. כל חובות בסליחה לבא.
תודה. 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 תודה.
Rebbe doesn't see a political figure, so here's a chance. He's coming and he says patronizing things, say patronizing things back. It's a nice political meeting. Rebbe met a big politician. We took pictures, shook hands, and move on. The Rebbe looks at it and says, what is this guy missing? What does this man need that he doesn't have yet? Where is he weakened? Not because the Rebbe is trying to exploit his weakness, because the Rebbe wants to make him stronger. How do you make Arik Sharon stronger? Torah, mitzvahs, rejecting that which is un-Jewish and un-Israeli.
The courageous Israeli soldiers and all the government, almost all the government figures were war heroes, and so they showed great courage. But somehow, when it came to pride in what they are, we are Jewish people. This is what is the most important part of ourselves and our country. And somehow, when it came to standing firm and being proud of this, we didn't see the courage, we didn't see the heroism there. And the Rebbe pushed that, and he told them, and here he tells Arik Sharon, or his aunt, remember that remind your nephew that his name is Arik, which means a proud lion. And remember what the pride is. What is the most proud thing about a Jew? The fact that we are Jewish.
V'nasati shalom. God says, I'll grant peace. At the end of the day, God's pulling the strings here. It's not about just your bravery or your courage, but ultimately it's God's miracles. And you elicit those miracles when you follow the words of the Torah. V'nasati, God brings peace in the land of Israel. And because it's Artzechem, because it's your land, because you behave as Jews, because you reject that which is un-Jewish. And that Arik Sharon is not prepared to campaign about. And that's bothersome. And that worries the Rebbe. Now Arik's aunt, all the women have to support the man. The aunt, the wife, they have to support Arik. Arik, yes, Arik, he's strong as a lion. Make sure you keep telling it to him. The Rebbe isn't negating the importance of the military, the importance of the political side of Israel. God forbid, I never said, everybody put on film, everybody daven, and the heck with the army. Never ever said that. There has to be an army, and there has to be a strong army. There has to be a government, there has to be a strong government. But they will receive their strength, and they'll be most successful when they have Torah and mitzvahs. Because that brings God's blessing.
Eretz Yisrael, Israel is not Haaretz, the land, it's not just a country like any other country. Eretz Yisrael is unique. It is the land, the Jewish homeland. Jewish homeland means, what does Yehudi, Jewish? Yehudi means that acknowledges God's supremacy. That is what Eretz Yisrael, Israel, must be. The Rebbe speaks to the prime minister who wants to speak about security issues, and the Rebbe says the most important concept that a prime minister has to know is that Israel is not another land. It is a land which is the Jewish land. And the Jewish homeland means the land where God's Torah, God's people will express their connection to God. And this must be done through the observance of Torah mitzvahs. And that is what the government needs to do. Promote, as in everything that the Rebbe did, promote it in a very gentle way, in a very positive way, not to try to coerce people into doing anything, but this must be the government's project.
Well, I'm not really the sponsor. Steinberg was the sponsor. I helped to carry. I'm the only Orthodox assembly Shabbos, and therefore.
You are satisfied if you only love?
No, absolutely not satisfied.
Then Yosef is not good.
It's not good. The problem is that in Albany it's away from Yiddishkeit. There's very little over there.
You are living in Albany?
No, but I come up during the week.
You can change something in the week, you can keep the movement, just when you person. Then you will have another problem, more success. Don't send them line to Yosef.
I understand. I believe, yes, that you're probably right, that it should be. besides Yochid, because it's definitely a movement is only as good as the leader is that leads them, but it should be entitled the whole movement, because they're...
You know, there was once there's an interesting article written by a conservative rabbi. He interviewed the Rebbe, and he said to the Rebbe something like, isn't the Rebbe like entirely... And the Rebbe became very pensive. He said, not necessarily. Now, if you would have asked me 10 years ago, I would have said, that's humility, whatever. But the truth is that the Rebbe hasn't been in a leadership position for 10 years. The Rebbe had a stroke 10 years ago. And after that, the Rebbe was not leading Lubavitch in the traditional sense. Lubavitch has prospered so much in the last 10 years that it's unparalleled in any other time in the history of Lubavitch. And that's despite the infighting and the difficulty of 2 years of illness and the Rebbe's passing. So many things that should have broken Lubavitch into pieces. So many things that should have splintered. All the experts suggested there'd be splinter movements and fragmentations. And believe me, we have a lot of problems. It's not so smooth. It's not so pretty. There is politics and there are fights and there are foolish people out there. There's all kinds of problems. And Lubavitch is attacked from within and from without. And in spite of that, Lubavitch has exhibited an amazing rate of growth in every one of its institutions and every one of its endeavors. What does that say to you? It says that the Rebbe created a movement that can move on its own.
As a leader, the Rebbe never saw himself as the leader which is the movement. He always saw himself as the leader who supports the movement. The movement was what it was all about. The movement was to promote that which the previous leaders had done. That's what the movement is about. And he will help in any way he can. He will move it along. Whatever he has to offer, he will offer in order to move the movement along. But he always de-emphasized his own himself as the leader. It was always about the movement. Of course, he would throw it back also. There was no such thing as he was the Rebbe. The Rebbe was the previous Rebbe, his father-in-law. He was the Rebbe, and he simply fills, he's not here now, so we need to have someone to sort of continue to promote what the Rebbe, the true Rebbe, the previous Rebbe in his mind said, and therefore he was there to carry the ball forward, but he wasn't the Rebbe, he wasn't the leader. The leader was always the previous Rebbe. In a way, we see it that way today too. The Rebbe still remains the Rebbe. Even after his passing 8 years ago, the Rebbe still remains the Rebbe. And we feel it. This is not just something that people say, but the truth is that we do feel connected to the Rebbe even today. This is 8-9 years after his passing. We feel deep connection to him. We see his influence in our daily lives. I know it's maybe difficult for people to relate to this, but we see, for instance, if we would take only one example of the way the Chabad movement has flourished in the last 8 years, way more than it flourished up until then.
Two very, very interesting points here. Here's a guy who is the only Orthodox assemblyman. He's the only one. He's struggling against, the influences of his environment, and he's a hero. He is the only one who is involved. He's in the thick of it. The Rebbe's perspective is so 360-degree thinking. So you're satisfied to be the only one? First, I'm the only one. I'm the one and only. Everybody wants to be the one and only. I'm the one who did it. I'm the one who fought against the influences. I'm the one. I'm the most chivalrous of people. So you're satisfied to be the only one? The Rebbe tells him, stop being so involved in yourself. The Rebbe senses within that statement a certain ego. I'm the only one. The only one? Should be many more. It's not about you being as wonderful. And that translates itself, of course, I know what you like so beautiful. The Rebbe says, don't underline the individual, underline the movement. I find something very interesting in there. It's much more than the traditional humility. Don't underline the movement, the individual, underline the movement. The Rebbe says something there. It's not just humility. The Rebbe says because it will be more successful. In other words, if it will be more successful, underlining the individual, underline the individual. Who cares? The Rebbe is not dealing with his ego in the sense that he has to be humble and say, no, please don't underline. Don't underline the individual because I'm humble. The Rebbe says it's a question what's more successful. If the government is passing something, then we want that to be successful and be as efficacious as possible. So don't underline the yachid, underline the movement, because in a democratic society, the movement carries more weight. In a political arena, votes kind of have more swing.
The Rebbe once said, my task is not to have a community of disciples and students and followers, to be a leader. My task and my mission is to make leaders out of everybody.
An onion is not a kind of fruit or vegetable to eat raw. Nobody takes a bite into an onion. An onion is used, you dice it up, and in small quantities, it adds spice and flavor. So the Rebbe says, the Rebbe is telling him, ego is not a good thing. It's an onion. It's sour, it's sharp, it doesn't taste good. But if it's well placed, it'll be okay. The most important thing is teach Chassidus. How you come along and say, but for me, I want to be humble. I want to be. Who cares what you want to be? What has to get done? If you need to be arrogant in order for something to get done, so be arrogant.
From the first day of when he has assumed the leadership of the Chabad movement, he said, it is my goal, it is my purpose, it is my mission, all of our mission, to bring the world into the Messianic era. And this is what guided his leadership for 40 years. Recently, meaning about 12 years ago, he said that we are on the heels of Mashiach. We are literally just around the corner. This would happen very soon, and it's time to make the world aware of it. Everyone has to prepare for this time. You don't want to get caught unawares.
When Mashiach comes, nothing physical will change. In a sense, not even anything political will change, at least in the first stages of Mashiach. As the Rambam Maimonides says clearly, the world will continue to conduct business as usual.
So, a great deal of that the negative publicity and the recent vociferous attacks against Lubavitch, it ultimately stems from ignorance. Most of these people haven't the foggiest idea, nor have they given much thought to what Mashiach really means.
So what will change? Everything will change. Priorities will completely change. Because the truth of the world, which is the purpose of the world, why the world was created, which is to reveal the oneness of God, will be revealed, and therefore, in the priorities will be completely changed. Everything will be driven to one point, for the purpose of revealing the oneness and unity of God.
The Rebbe was very preoccupied about the concept of Mashiach, which really means the salvation, human salvation for the world, where finally everything would be perfect. He needed this, he wanted this for his people.
The Rebbe was tailored to lead us in our generation, the last generation, the lowest generation before Mashiach, the generation that is in the hills of the last stages of Galus, of exile.
If you knew that somebody important was coming to your home, you would prepare your home not to be embarrassed that when they walk in they see something which is inappropriate for their presence. Make your life a place where you're proud for the Messiah to come into your home and say, this is a nice place to come to.
When you understand Mashiach for what the movement of a messianic movement, the change in the world that a Mashiach introduces, is a time that the world becomes transparent. That the concealment, that the confusion that was built into the world just dissipates. And there's going to be a negation of ego. Because ego is a self-aggrandizement. It's something other than godliness. It ultimately represents the opposite of godliness. Why is it that in the Messianic era the wolf will lie with the lamb? Why is it that the wolf doesn't lie with the lamb now? Because the wolf is hungry. So you're hungry. I mean, eat fruits and vegetables. What do you want from the poor lamb? No, the wolf is so hungry that if he has to kill the lamb, he'll kill the lamb. But his ego, his food comes first. When Mashiach comes, all of a sudden, his eyes are open, and the wolf doesn't have to eat the lamb because he says, well, I should be considerate. The wolf doesn't see himself as the most important or the biggest ego. The wolf is ready to forget about his own importance. You live in peace. Maimonides writes that this may be a parable. It may be literal, it may be a metaphor. It's the same thing. Why are there wars? Why is there infighting? Why is there jealousy? Because people are saying, well, who's better and who's greater? And I need to express myself. It ultimately boils down to ego. Revenge, anger, competition. It's all about ego. It says when Mashiach comes, there is no more competition. Not because that the symptom of competition will be removed, but because the underlying cause of competition, that ego, is taken away. So God's knowledge will be everywhere. The world will be pervaded by godliness, which means that all of the egos disappear. And everything senses its direct connection and nullification to God. And when a chassid looked at the Rebbe, he saw a messianic individual. An individual whose world was Mashiach because he saw him as egoless. Because he saw him as a perfect person, a person who didn't think about himself for a moment. A person who always looked at the bigger picture. A person who was always concerned not with me, not with my ego, not with my importance or my self-aggrandizement, but with God's world, God's will. So when they looked at the Rebbe represented in a microcosmic way the cosmic concept of a Mashiach. We have a letter in which the Rebbe writes that from when he was 3 years old, his mind was already preoccupied, and he imagined what the world would look like in the time of Mashiach when he was 3 years old. And he said something very interesting. In his mind, at that time, the Mashiach and this world of perfection had to be so perfect that it would cancel out all the difficulties that we have been through for the last thousands of years. Now imagine the perfection that is needed to say it was all worth it. What can balance the Holocaust? The Rebbe said that Mashiach, this time that we are looking forward to very soon, the Rebbe said, is such a beautiful time that it would actually balance out all the difficulties of the entire exile, of the entire difficulties that the Jewish people went through for so many generations. It's almost beyond imagination. How could you imagine such a terrific time that will cancel out all the difficulties?
When he assumed officially the leadership of Chabad, the Rebbe quoted a midrash based on a verse in the Song of Songs, that in the time of the giving of the Torah, God said, oh, I came back to my garden, my original garden. When God created the world, his original place was in this world, and then through various sins, he has removed himself from being revealed in this world. And then through the various sages, tzaddikim, starting from Avraham, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, subsequently Levi and Kehos and Amram, each one brought the Shekhinah closer, until finally Moses was the one who brought back the Shekhinah, the divine revelation of God, back to this world. And the Rebbe spoke in an allegory that the Rebbe is the seventh of the dynasty of Chabad. And the job of the dynasty of Chabad is to bring God back into the world, to bring Mashiach. And therefore, the Rebbe said, the seventh generation is not the most unique generation because it's special, because it's the greatest. But the very fact that it's the seventh indicates that it got the task to bring God to the lowest elements of the world. That was the blueprint of the Rebbe's leadership. That was the message that the Rebbe charged us with. What's our job?
Mama.